Coming up, Sandy Dunn joins us to share the insights that she's gained on her unique journey to the role of CISO. And then the company Splunk just acquired, how to change your habits and why it's good to go fast and break things. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show about security startups, how to secure your startup, and advice for security startups. It's Business Security Weekly.
I need it from the top.
Brought to you by, are you getting pressure to improve your data security? Would you like a faster, easier, better way to patch? Then you need to check out Automox. Automox is a cloud-native platform that patches and manages every endpoint, even remote servers and devices, including Windows, Mac, Linux, and third-party software from a single dashboard. Improve your cyber hygiene, reduce your attack surface, and save 90% of the effort you spend patching. Automox, your patching system of record. Do you have a website, an external presence, employees, an office? Any of these things can be compromised and attacked. How are you defending your assets? Have you penetration tested your public assets? Start 2018 by taking a proactive approach to securing your vulnerable areas. Black Hills Information Security has been helping companies find their weaknesses since 2008. Email consulting@blackhillsinfosec.com and see how they can help you sleep better at night. Today's determined attackers easily bypass even the most advanced network defenses. Trying to ramp up staff to detect their backdoors can cost thousands of dollars and take months, even years. With Active Countermeasures AI Hunter, we enable junior analysts to detect even the most advanced backdoors in a matter of hours. Sign up for a demo and purchase our product today by visiting activecountermeasures.com/BSW. Active Countermeasures. Make every analyst a hunter.
Hello and welcome to Business Security Weekly. It's episode number 89. We're creeping up on 100. We're recording this live Monday, June 17th, 2018. Actually, it's the 18th.
It's definitely the 18th.
It's definitely the 18th. So it's the summer, and apparently I can't count anymore. Kids are out of school. I can't keep track of it anymore. Look, this is the show where we're exploring the business of security because we want to improve the security of business. So our goal is to be your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. I'm still Michael Santarcangelo, your straight-talking guide. And I spend my time working with both enterprise security teams and vendors. I'm looking at how we overcome that friction and how we translate that understanding, our value into understanding. And apparently this is going to be a tough day for me getting through it. So luckily, joining us from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island is your friend of mine, Paul Asadorian.
You started off great.
and then
Excuse me.
Just tongue-tied, apparently.
Good Lord. We're just a hot mess all of a sudden, Michael. Well, maybe not all of a sudden, but you started off the show great. I love your introduction. I think it's fantastic. My other comment is your caulk board behind you is pretty empty. So
I cleaned it up this weekend. It's time to rethink about the next quarter ahead.
I mean, you must have been super productive to have a clean cork board.
It's a combination of super productive and, okay, I didn't get to this yet. I didn't get to this yet. Shit, I didn't get to this yet. So it was a blend. But I actually do have some new goals, and in fact was spending some time this morning looking at like just the next 3 weeks, like next 2 weeks. To be fair, in fact, just as a quick preview for next week, we're going to go through something called the time audit. And this is something I've been working with both on the vendor side and on the enterprise client side. And it's the answer to that question, well, what are you working on and what can you take on? And as I started doing that myself, I went, okay, I've prioritized some of these things a little sooner than I can get to them, but let me think about the best next step. It's funny, I was just following my own advice and realized that if I focused on a couple things a little bit better, I'd get better results. So the board behind me is clear, except for the artwork that my children have donated to me, and check every day to make sure it's still there. And so it is.
Oh, yeah, you can't drop the ball on that, dude, because they will call you out. They
know immediately.
They do.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? Oh, so my presentation at SERI over the weekend, Michael, I channeled you in front of a crowd of social engineers. Now, what was interesting was, and I thought you'd find this interesting, and our listeners as well, it was a small-ish, it was the first time they ran, excuse me, SERI. They're renaming the conference to Layer 8, the Layer 8 conference, right? And they've got a cool logo. I think it's a much better name than Social Engineering Rhode Island, which is pretty funny. But because it's very self-describing. But So it was about 70 registrants. There was probably a pretty good turnout. I would say 50 or 60 people of that 75 in my estimation.
Solid. That's great. Yeah.
Great turnout. Beautiful location in Newport, Rhode Island. So I started asking folks, because I was still working on my slides at the booth, because long story. But so I was like, hey, like, have you ever read the book Never Split the Difference? And they're like, no. I'm like, you do social engineering as like your job? And like a couple of people, including presenters, are like, yeah, that's what I do. I think it was Summer Lee who I was talking to, and everyone was so nice too. Summer, she's awesome. And they're like, no, I haven't. I'm like, have you read The Brain Audit by Sean D'Souza? And they're like, no, I haven't. Now, the book that people did read, Michael, was How to Win Friends and Influence People by Carnegie, but pretty much the hardcore trio that we have, including Play Bigger, really none of the social engineers, including Chris Adnagi, who is like he is the human hacker, literally, had not read these books. And we're fascinated how I was able to, and I was, again, like, I wonder if I can pull this off in a presentation, how I was able to relate those to social engineering. So, Michael,
you totally relate those, yeah.
Your work in bringing these books and content to our listeners here has now extended out into the social engineering realm as well. So it's pretty cool.
That's awesome. It's making me then look at the Robert Cialdini stuff a little bit more. The persuasion, influence. I mean, those are some of the tomes on the topics. But yeah, we'll keep looking at it. I'm actively trying to figure out books for the back half of the year. I'm actually working through some stuff with my kids, believe it or not. Got them new Kindles so they can start reading some stuff. And we're working through some as a family. And all I'll say so far that I figured out is there's an interesting balance between reading broadly and reading deeply. And I'm trying to figure out what that balance is going to look like, both for me and then therefore for us. But it'll be good stuff.
Awesome.
Let's talk about Sandy.
Yes, let's talk about Sandy.
Before we actually show her picture, Sandy's pretty awesome. And it's I've had a great conversation with her, and she's had such a great story. So I'm really excited about this. So what we'll say is she's the CISO for a medical insurance company, and she currently resides in beautiful Idaho. But her path is fascinating. Like this is an easy conversation, but I'll tell you, she's also what I've really appreciated, Sandy, because I know you're listening, obviously, as you come on board. The things that you're willing to talk about and give voice to are fascinating because these are the things that we need. And so she's here today to share some of the lessons that she's learned. So Sandy, welcome finally to Business Security Weekly.
Hi guys, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's exciting. All right, so let's start with the easy stuff, I guess. So how did you get to be a CISO? Did you just wake up one morning and say, I know what I want to be when I grow up?
So I started taking a bunch of SANS classes, and I shared with you and with Paul that really at the start of my security career, how I started learning about security was I started downloading Paul.com podcasts. And Twitchy and Larry and Paul would go through all of the different tools and different events that happened that week. And my homework would be to go figure out everything that they were talking about. So as I started down that journey, they would talk about SANS all the time. So I jumped in, and as soon as I could get someone to pay for my first SANS class, I took the SANS 401, became a SANS mentor, and then just kept trying to learn. So so as I started down that path, I'm actually friends with Carrie Roberts. And she had jumped into the SANS master's program, the engineering master's program, and she pushed me to go get my master's in information security management from SANS.
Now, how long was that program?
It took me about 3.5 years to get through it. Part of the problem was my gold papers. Like I never figured out how to scope my gold papers, and I would spend like hours and way too long doing research, and it took me just forever to get through them.
I just want to say, Sandy, thank you for listening. Back then, certainly, we still have that today, and I'm still kind of surprised that people listen, because we're like, well, we're just a bunch of people that like to drink and talk about security, so let's do a podcast. And there's always a lot of shenanigans that go on, especially on Paul's Security Weekly. And so I'm glad you were, and obviously people got value from it, and you did as well, which is awesome. And then continued down the SANS route, which is pretty cool. Carrie's a super smart individual. I love Carrie. She's awesome. So.
Yep, she's very smart.
How did you like managing the workload and doing school at the same time? Or at least did you, like somebody else sitting here now saying, whoa, that's interesting. Because I picked up two things quick. listening to the stuff that we talk about on a program like this, and now we have 7, 8 programs depending on your likes. That's a lot of really good way to break something down and apply it. But then you're also layering in a highly structured and respected program like SANS. How did you manage your time?
I did not sleep very much, and there were times when like I took out things that weren't necessary, like showering. You're just like, you get in the zone and you're just like, I got to get through this. And I will say that your family sacrifices with you. I mean, my daughter didn't get to go to a lot of things because mom was always back there writing papers and studying.
Yeah,
of course, now she's a world-class hacker, so it's okay.
Yeah, there's certainly some impact to your family and social life when you're doing that stuff, and having people to support you is super important.
Yeah, if you're planning on it, just go in with your eyes wide open that you're not the only person that you have to think about.
Yeah, that's solid advice for sure. So did you always know, like through all the studying, that you were going to be a CISO? Was that a goal that you had identified, or did you kind of just fall into the role?
So I had, as I progressed, I started out in competitive intelligence, and that's when I first started listening to your show, the Paul.com show. And then as I progressed through roles at HP, I became an information security officer, and I identified where I was the most value was the bridge between the business and security, like being able to break down, being able to talk to both camps and help them find kind of the best path forward. So I did want to be a CISO. So I was with HP for 15 years in various roles. I started out as a contractor. I was a contractor for 6 years and then was a full-time employee. And then I was looking for the next challenge. And I've always believed that security people don't necessarily join companies, we join teams. And there was another really great team in town, and they just rocked. The people were awesome. Everyone, they seemed to be always on the cutting edge of doing smart things. And they had an opening for an IT security architect. So I applied for that, and I accepted that position. And part of the reason that I changed companies was the CISO who was in the role at that company, I really admired. He was really good at building teams. He was really good at talking to the business. He was just a great person. And I thought, okay, in my career path as a mentor, learning from this person how to be a great CISO will help me, when I finally get to be a CISO. And I was there for a month and a half, and he left. And they walked him out the door the next day and put me in as interim. And I was like, okay, I've only been here a month and a half. I really don't know that much about being a CISO. Okay, let's go. Let's do this. So thankfully, I had a really great team. We really tackled it as a group. We had another security, the SecOps manager left a month later. And I was like, that was kind of a tipping point for me. I was just trying to keep the plane in the air, keep us headed in the right direction, and make sure we didn't go backwards. And when he left, I was like, uh-oh, the plane's going to crash. And I was able to backfill him very quickly. He was able to train the person who took over his role. So, just had the right people supporting me and kind of coaching me in the right direction. Now I've been the CISO. I was interim from February to August, and I've been a full-time CISO since August.
Did anything change when you went from interim to full-time?
Absolutely, because as interim, I had all of the responsibility without any of the authority. And I couldn't really develop my plan I couldn't develop a strategy. I couldn't really talk about what my vision was because I didn't really know what I was. Am I the CISO? I couldn't even sign things. I couldn't hire people. So it was truly a challenge.
That's interesting. All right. So one of the things and there's a lot here for us to talk about. But one of the things that's really interesting to me is you and I talked about questions, and you specifically said you're not afraid of asking a dumb question. It's one of those things that you and I quickly bonded over because I feel the same way. So let's talk about that. Like, what does that mean? Is that something that came out of your competitive intelligence background? Is that something you had already? Like, what does it mean by a dumb question? Like, when you say that, what has that experience been for you, and what are the benefits that you get with your willingness to just keep asking questions?
Well, so at HP, I mean, there's just volumes of absolutely brilliant people, but a lot of them are academically brilliant. And so I would just, of course, do my own research before I would go talk to them. But then when I was trying to connect the dots, it's, if I didn't get it, I was honest about it. I'd say, you know what? I'm sorry, I don't get this. This doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand how this will ever be viable. I don't understand how this talks to this, how this talks to this. I don't understand how we can say this is secure when we're getting the files and email from China. That doesn't make sense to me. And so the more I was transparent about not understanding the process, I would see other people being willing to say, well, yeah, we didn't get it either, but we didn't want to look dumb.
Yeah, and so I that's the distinction I want to make, is that a lot of times we'll say, oh, that's a dumb question. And a lot of times it's not. You're asking a question that other people have that they're reluctant to ask because they don't want to be cast as being dumb. How did you get over that? Is that just innate to you? You just, hey, I don't understand, I'm going to ask the question? Or is it something that you've intentionally practiced and built up?
So you're asking, am I dumb by default or dumb on purpose?
I didn't think of it that way, but I think that's exactly what I'm asking.
Okay.
Oh my God, that was awesome. Sorry.
That was really good.
I would say it was just a willingness to not try to be the expert in the room, because I wasn't. Everyone else was measuring their last research paper, and I didn't have that baggage. I was willing to say, I don't understand. This does not make sense to me. But part of it's just persistence. And, a lot of times, if I was to look back and say, okay, what were the things that were that made me successful? It was really durability. It was, I would send out emails needing information for a report I was writing or from somebody, and I'd send them, my strategy was I'd send them 3 emails. When they didn't respond, I'd go figure out where their desk was, and I'd walk up and say, hi, I've sent you 3 emails. I'm sure you're busy. You might have missed them, but I really need that information. Could you have it by tomorrow? And, and if they didn't respond to that, I was back the next day. And finally, I got to the point where they just responded to the first email because they knew I wouldn't give up.
That's fantastic.
That's interesting. And Evan just gave a presentation about applying sales tactics to social engineering. What I just got from that, Sandy, was applying sales tactics such as persistence to your career within the organization, because you're absolutely right. Sometimes you need information from someone or the other, and you just have to be persistent about getting it, and that's really cool.
Yeah, and that's where I came from, Paul. I actually came out of sales. I started in, when I got out of college, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to be. I started in radio sales, got into software sales, got into PC sales. You do learn. I mean, the most important thing about that is understanding your customer.
Mm-hmm.
What do they need? What's important to them?
Well, yeah, now you've hit on something that we talk about a lot, and I did in my talk as well, is understanding what other people need. Right. And that it plays into sales, but I'm like, wow, this applies to a lot of other things too.
Yeah. And salespeople get a bad name, but the truth is we're all salespeople, right?
Yep.
If I want a new horse, I've got to go pitch it to my husband and convince him that, hey, we absolutely need this new horse.
Sandy, has he ever said no? I'm just asking. I'm just curious.
That is my hobby, is horses. Okay. I mean, you ask what was my
some
career
sales
path?
are easier than others.
Yes, that's true. What motivated me was the need for more hay. I mean, that was my career path.
Well, now I want to go back to something about the persistence too, because I think this is a nuance, and maybe I'm wrong. My instinct here, Sandy, though, is that if you asked a question and you said, okay, I'm going to send 3 messages, you weren't asking frivolous questions. You had a purpose. You were asking something that you needed in order to move forward. And if somebody pressed you, like, why do you need this? You could explain it to them, as opposed to just, hey, I'm over here, hey, I'm over here, hey, I'm over here, right. Hey, this is really important. Like, so then your reputation was built on, if Sandy's asking for something, she needs it, and she's going to follow up on it until she gets it. But by the way, she's not wasting our time, so just go ahead and give it to her up front. Is that fair to say that you didn't waste people's time with your questions. They were things that were important and necessary, and therefore your reputation was you weren't a time waster, but you kind of needed the results.
Right. And I would also highlight that I always did my own research. I found as much information as I could on my own before I went and had to seek out that person's valuable time to ask them to help me.
Yeah, I think that's important. And I think it's important too if you're in sales, you're in marketing, or anything else. Understanding what somebody needs or what they want and trying to figure out what you want is good. But doing that little bit of respect up front makes a big difference. Now, what's interesting too is I think one of your strengths is, and you've talked about how you weren't really trained on how security is supposed to be, and that you're interested in process, you're intellectually curious. All these things are really fascinating to you. So how has that played out in the way that you're crafting the role of CISO and how you're helping your organization improve security?
Yeah, I think it's basically that same hacker mentality where I related to the hacker culture because I didn't just follow the rules because it was a rule. I needed to understand the why. And so going in and someone would say, well, we always do it this way. And I'd always say, well, why? Why do we always do it that way? That doesn't make sense to me. And so, I would say that's definitely been, that kind of hacker mentality of not accepting rules for the sake of rules.
You know what? I love that. I love that just because I feel like a lot of times in security, we enforce, or I like to say, inflict rules for the sake of rules. And then when pushed back, people go, oh, I don't know, because that's how we do it. Yeah. It seems, though, that because you're willing to say, no, what are we trying to actually get done? And ask those questions that other people are reluctant to ask, you're kind of getting where you need to be. How does that tie into then, and I've had this come up a bunch recently, this idea of pushing left in the organization or shifting left in the organization. You and I touched on it briefly. How is that unfolding for you?
Yeah, I sent you a presentation I just did for the local data governance committee, and I talked about emergencies where it's like, I think what's very common in the cybersecurity field is we just get exhausted. I mean, there's just everything's urgent, everything's an emergency. A new bug just came out that's going to take down the business, and you get to the point where you're just like, if you compare it to the little boy who cries wolf and you're a villager, you don't even care if he cries wolf anymore. You actually hope the wolf eats the sheep so you can go home and get some sleep and see your family. You're just like done. I'm like, I can't handle another fire. And so I think that what I've been really driving my team to do is if something gets to an escalation or, oh my God, this is broken, we got to fix it. How did it get there? And, we're not done when we fix the problem. We're done when we fix how it got there, and when we fix the process in general. I mean, if someone needs to hook up to something in the firewall, well, how come we didn't know that beforehand? Is that part of our requirements process that got skipped? Why? How did it become a fire? So really trying to understand requirements up front. And being in the healthcare industry, I think one of the things that was surprising when I got here was just how conservative it was. But there's a reason for that, because the risk is so high. Every decision that we make, comes with heavy consequences. So decisions are made very carefully. And so right now we're actually at a point where we're trying to make massive changes, and that has increased a lot of churn and kind of new territory. So really helping people say, just going fast may create a bigger disaster for us in the end than, having that new widget on somebody's mobile phone. Really understanding the benefit to our members of trying to introduce. Yes, they want this, but at what cost? And understanding the process, from the very beginning, understanding security requirements up front. I can't tell you how many meetings I get pulled into and they go, okay, we're releasing this into production next week. Can you tell us, is this secure? I'm like, what? What is it? What does it do? What data is it handling? Who's it touching? Who's logging into it? I can't tell you, what it is until I know, what do we need to protect? Who do we need to protect it from? And then we decide how we're going to protect it. So one of the things that I use as an example is if someone came up to me and said, is your truck secure? I'd say, absolutely. It's 110 Dodge. It's 4-wheel drive, brand new tires. It's very secure. And they'd say, well, you're going to be carrying President Trump and plutonium. is it secure? And I'd be absolutely not. You have to understand those requirements up front before you can ever decide whether or not you have the right solution at the end.
That's right. What do you mean by secure? I want to go back because I love the idea of if something gets to an escalation point, and the way I would even look at it, if I might add a dimension, is, and it's creating unplanned work.
Unplanned work. Thank you, Michael. Yes, I was just
go into it and say, okay. And by the way, I've got this, and we'll talk about this more next week. The way I distinguish it is there's planned work, there's anticipated work. So those of us that are highly responsive, the answer isn't, well, I can't plan for it. You can anticipate it, and you can budget for it. And then there's the unplanned work, and those are the fire drills. I love that. How much time are you finding it's taking then to kind of go back and do those postmortems and engineer or re-engineer the processes? Is this a lot of time, or as you're working into it, it's just a little bit, because it feels to me like there's a little bit of discipline required for this. But my experience is the payoff is worth it. How's that unfolding for you, Sandy?
No, I think for me was, and I think, I can't remember if we talked about it, Michael, or not, but I had read the Phoenix Project or listened to the Phoenix Project several years ago and absolutely loved it. And everyone who's in security or in IT can relate to that book. But then I listened to Beyond the Phoenix Project with John Willis and Gene Kim, and that was just, it was almost like I was just at a point of exhaustion. We had just gone through, just fire drill after fire drill after fire drill, and it's almost like an alcoholic finding, the 7 steps, at their lowest point. I got that book and I started listening to it. I was like, oh, thank God. And immediately, like I listened to it over an entire weekend. I just listened to it nonstop, and it came in Monday morning. I was so excited. I was just like, this is it. This is what we got to do. We have to fix this. And went out and listened to the goal. And I think the really fascinating thing to me is you look at the goal. It was written in 1984. It's like, we know how to fix this. How come we can't do it?
Yep, I'm with you, Sandy, and I think the thing that I pulled from that is, for our listeners, that the Beyond the Phoenix Project is a newer offering, a newer book, and I found that the most helpful. Now, I don't think you can just go listen to that. I think you have to listen or read the Phoenix Project, then you have to do the Beyond the Phoenix Project, then maybe the goal, and then there was a Beyond the Goal, because they mirrored that process, and all of those are important, but that going from the Phoenix Project to listening to Beyond the Phoenix Project, the value I got from Beyond Phoenix Project was unbelievable. And it sounds like you had a similar experience, so it wasn't just me.
Yeah, no, I was so excited about it. I've been handing out the Phoenix Project like the Gideon Bible here. I mean, like, I give it away, like, out of my own pocket, like, please read this.
Right?
Fantastic.
Yeah, and so what is it about the Beyond the Phoenix Project? For me, I feel like it helped me, and I hate the analogy, but put the expression, put the rubber to the road, but it kind of helped me understand how to implement what concepts were covered in the Phoenix Project. Was that what it was like for you too?
Well, and probably the what it helped me conceptualize the most was I started thinking in manufacturing plant terms. Like, I started when I go into a meeting and I talk to people now, I go, okay, if you look at it this way, we were producing 100 cars and now we're trying to produce 1,000 cars, and we never upgraded the manufacturing plant. That's a problem. Of course we're going to have problems. So it actually helped me probably explain to people what the problems were in our own environment in a method that they could understand.
Yeah.
Systems thinking, right? It's the easy way to guide people in the systems thinking without freaking them out. How do you find then that when you say, "Hi, I'm from security," and I want to ask a couple of questions so we get this better, are people pushing you away and saying, "Oh, Sandy, we're so busy, we don't have time," or are they saying, "Wow, this is great. Yeah, here's how we work, and that'd be great to do more," or is it somewhere in between? What's the experience been?
Yeah, so I feel really fortunate about that. I mean, people here at this organization absolutely believe that we want to protect our information. So I have the people, they want to do the right thing, they just don't know how. Yep. And so I spend a lot of time educating. I do that, like we had a capture the flag event last week. We do cyber tips in the weekly newsletter. I'm kind of using that same, I'm kind of hacking the human of, if I help people protect their information, they're going to help me protect my information. It's always water on a rock. And, back to Christian, I think Masha touched on this too. I always make sure that they know that, I want them to be successful. We're partners in the business success. I understand that without them doing business, nobody has a job here, not even the security team. We can be the best security team ever, but if the business isn't successful, then we failed. So making sure that they see us as non-threatening. Even we had a phishing vendor in here when I first came into this position, and the language when you clicked on it and you failed was kind of like, oh, hey, you dummy, why did you click on that? And I was like, absolutely not. We will.
Right.
I want people to always see security as an enabler and never see us as the jerks that come around trying to make their life difficult.
I love that new approach. Also, I think you're the first guest who has done the callbacks to other guests for us. So thank you so much, because that makes it really easy for us. Now, what's interesting then is that what you're saying here is we can't keep telling people no. So you're on one hand, you're struggling to keep pace and trying to figure out how to improve the systems and the processes. On the other hand, you don't want to be the party of no anymore. You need to get there and work with people and elevate them through it. But that kind of creates this interesting reality for you, because we've seen where security is used in a lot of places, legitimately or otherwise, as the scapegoat. So now as the CISO, what are you afraid of having to fall on your sword at some point, or where does that enter into this process for you?
Yeah, I think you and I kind of talked a little bit about that. Was kind of when Alex Stamos was at his kind of went through kind of the churn at Facebook. I commented to you that I think that every CISO knows at some point they're going to be either agree with the C-suite, or they're going to have to disagree, and they're going to have to make a personal choice about how that will impact them. You may have to fall on your sword and say, I don't approve of this, and you get fired and you go find the next job. I think that for me, I know where the line is. I know where ethically I will not do something that I don't agree with. That my first mission is to protect the members' data here. That is my number one mission. And if that's ever compromised, then I have to take a stand.
Yeah, and I think that's the risk, especially in today's world, that being a CISO runs, and you really got to stick to your guns. Like Alex did, and I'm sure many other CISOs that we haven't heard about yet. Right. You have to stick by your morals and say, eventually it could reach a crossroads where I just got to leave because it's not for me anymore.
Yeah, you have to protect, and I feel very strongly about protecting my team. I mean, I tell them all the time that that's my job, is to step in front of the moving train. Like, their job is to protect the environment. My job is to step in front of the moving train. And so, and there's different tools. I partner with compliance. I partner with legal. We have a risk acceptance form that is pretty aggressive. That calls out the risks and I ensure that executives have to sign it that shows that they're accepting the risk. So that when you force someone to sign something that says I'm accepting $2 million worth of risk, they'll pause. They'll say, maybe we can wait until this assessment is done, or maybe we can wait until we have that control in place that you're recommending.
I love adding the quantification to it, as opposed to some nebulous.
Yeah.
You accept the risk? Yeah. Risk, it's good all day. Nope. Here's how much you're accepting, and here's what it means. That's a great element to it. I really appreciate the fact that you brought that up, because I think it's one of those things that we talk about quietly. We see someone else fall on their sword, or someone else get shown the door, and we go, but wait, hold on. Well, what would happen there? Well, could that happen to me? And I think it's fair, because that enters into it. And I think other executives in other parts of an organization might at times feel the same way, but there's a certain turbulence to security right now, and a certain set of demands that I'm not sure are always realistic. And taking on the role means fighting some battles that are not so clear yet. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that you're doing it. It sounds, everything that I've heard, your team they're lucky to have you guiding them through all of this. as are the members protecting their information. So that's fantastic. I appreciate it. I mean, Paul's been doing this longer, but it's been really fascinating for me, Sandy, to see how you're proof that we can advance in this field and we can learn new things and we can bring these ideas together and we can share them and get better with it. That's all really exciting to me. So thanks a ton for coming on the Business Security Weekly and sharing that and sharing those insights with us and helping us connect some of those dots. So that's a blast.
I really appreciate your persistence, Sandy, and your willingness to learn and consume content and integrate that into your job. I think you've done a phenomenal job of that. I think your T-shirt needs to be "I ride horses and I know things." I think that's your shirt.
Yeah. Yeah. Or I'm dumb by whatever. That's gonna remember that one for the future. That was awesome. All right. Well, so that was good stuff. We're gonna take a quick break, which is a great chance to go to securityweekly.com. You can check us out, sample our shows, engage with our on-demand content, get your journey kick-started the direction you want to go. And when we come back, Paul and I are going to discuss some quick updates to the programming, some surveys we're going to be working on, innovation, insights, everything you need to power your week and have an awesome summer is with us in a minute, right when we come back.
Domain Tools help security analysts turn threat data into threat intelligence. They take indicators from your network, including domains and IP addresses, and connect them with nearly every active domain on the internet. Those connections drive risk assessments, help profile attackers, guide online fraud investigations, and map cyber activity to attacker infrastructure. Fortune 1000 companies, global government agencies, and leading security solutions vendors use the Domain Tools platform as a critical ingredient in their threat investigations and proactive defenses. For more information, visit securityweekly.com/domain tools. Are your existing solutions able to take advantage of real threat intelligence? Common solutions like firewalls weren't designed to handle the massive and growing volume of threat indicators. This challenge often results in significant gaps in your protections, even when you think you have it covered. You need to protect yourself by filtering network traffic against unique threat indicators in a way that allows you to act. Palawall by Bandora Systems is the solution that filters over 10 million indicators right out of the box. Developed in partnership with the Department of Defense, Palawall is affordable for companies of all sizes. Get your free trial today at bandorasystems.com. Rapid7 powers the practice of SecOps. Using shared data, analytics, and automated workflows, SecOps unites IT, DevOps, and security teams to make security an outcome of innovation. Rapid7 combines technology, expertise, and advocacy to drive vulnerability management, application security, incident detection, and log management for more than 7,000 organizations worldwide. Power up your SecOps practice with a free trial at rapid7.com/securityweekly.
We are back, and we're going to try something different this week. We're going to keep it to a 2-segment show. So here's what's happened. We've already interviewed on the program Dan Wheatley, and Paul and I are enjoying working with Dan. He's gone in, he's looked at some of the statistics, he's looked at some of the information for us, and he came back with a pretty interesting finding. And Paul and I just decided we're going to go ahead and share it with you. And now I don't have the exact stat in front of me, but basically most of you who listen to Business Security Weekly engage with us to about 48 minutes long. So what we would say in the industry, it's good engagement, but it kind of cuts off. So it's like the first 2 out of 3 segments. My logical question back to Dan was, so are people engaging in the update section, or are they sticking around for just the interviews, or the interviews or discussion? And the answer was, yeah, I don't know yet. So what Paul and I have looked at is, for the summer at least, as things are a little busier for a lot of us, we take some time off. We've got time. We don't want to inundate you where you're like, skip, delete. At least if you do that, I know I do that a lot of times with podcasts I can't catch up on. We're going to try to keep it a little bit tighter, and we're going to try to look at stuff a little bit differently. But there's 2 things that you're going to see from us. First of which is we just put together our audience survey. We really want to know what you think. In fact, it's kind of interesting. I mean, Paul, we're almost at show number 100 here. This is your full-time occupation. Like, this is what you do. This is a fantastic legacy you've built. And as Sandy just explained, from the days of just a PSW show back with a former name, grown up now to 8 different things. I think we've given people a lot of stuff to grow with in this network. And so when we do this, we've designed it so far, and we're going to make maybe one more tweak to it, and then we're going to make it live. So please look for that. If you haven't yet, it will definitely be on the securityweekly.com website. There'll be a big, gigantic way for you to come give us your feedback.
We'll have a URL that we'll read on the show too, Michael, for that.
Yeah, and we're gonna push it because, and here's the idea. We've gone through these questions. Paul, Dan, we've all gone through these questions. We've thought about them. We've thought about specifically why we're asking that, how that helps us. And it's that combination. If you think about the interview we just had with Sandy, it's understanding what you need. It's understanding what you want and what you like, but also understanding what you need, because that gives us that ability to look at those trends. And we pledge the same transparency that I favor, that we love to be able to offer you on this program. And so far, it's timing out to take 7 minutes or less for you to share your thoughts and ideas with us. But then consider this the renewed invitation to always feed back to us. A lot of the segments that we've created are because you're telling us what you want. You're telling us the challenges that you're looking for our insights on, and we've created. That's why we're going to talk about time audits next week. And I'm telling you, it's a big, important thing. And so I'm going to spend some time this week tidying that up, and that'll be our opening segment next week as we work through those different things. So let us know, like, do you follow these innovation updates? Is it worth our time to put those together for you and track it? Is that useful? Or maybe is that something that you'd like us to see every other week or once a month? We do those types of updates just as a segment and just give you the high notes. Are there things that you'd like us to see do more of around communication and leadership and innovation? We're going to be happy to explore any or all of that. That's your chance to be able to do that. And for this week, we're going to kind of combine the two. I got to tell you what, it was a pretty light week in terms of things happening. And Paul found a pretty cool article. And so, hey, you know what? We merged them together. We'll see where it goes. And we're going to keep trying some different stuff. So stick with us and guide us. Tell us what you want. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you want. And we're here because we want you to be successful. Like, it's funny. We just had a fantastic interview with Sandy. Great interview with Masha last week. Great interview with Christian the week before that. Like, we've had fantastic insights from you, sharing with each other about the stuff that you like. We want more of that. And we're here to provide that. So we're pretty excited about that. Anything to add, Paul?
No, I mean, help us help you. And also, we ask
Stand
our
up in your desk when you
listeners.
say that.
And our listeners are going to help us, right? It ends of mutual benefit is really kind of was my thoughts when you were describing all of that, Michael, right? And I think that the strategy for Security Weekly is I don't want to ever have to ask for a donation from the listeners or charge for an episode. So in order to do that, we have to have sponsors. So help us make sure that the programming is right for you, and we understand you're going to have to, hear sponsored interviews and sponsorships, and largely people are okay with that. I want to make sure we maintain the balance. And want to make sure that there's enough benefit here in the show, and also, bring the sponsors in as well. And knowing that's our strategy, and also some of the information, we're not going to share your information with our sponsors for this survey. We're not going to share it outside of anywhere, right? It's just for us. It'll be as anonymized as possible. I think there will be an option if you want to talk with us, actually have a conversation with us, about the survey. You can put your name and email in, and we'll contact you. Other than that, we don't collect the information. But we need information about who listens, basically, so we can best position our sponsors so that, again, we can have a mutually beneficial relationship with our sponsors as well. And I think
in fact,
that's the strategy.
Anecdotally, Paul, people have stopped me at shows to thank us because we've called attention to through some of our partnerships and sponsorships to things that they didn't know existed, and it's worked out really well for them.
Yeah, and we want to continue to do that, obviously.
And as I've pointed out to people all along, what I really have enjoyed about working with you is that you care. So it's not like, oh, you've got a check, cool, welcome to Security Weekly. Like you're validating it, you're checking with everybody, you're looking all those things out. And so definitely helping us understand the challenges that you're facing helps us figure out if there's anybody we should target, anybody we should exclude, anybody that we should engage in that conversation. And then one of the things we strive to do here is help them tell their stories in context. You'll notice, especially on this program, you don't get a lot of marketing speak. You get somebody come in and talking about the problem they're trying to solve, why they're excited about it, what's different about it. We want to keep doing that. And the better we understand your challenges, the more we can make everything work for everybody. And so that's our goal. And I'm excited about it. Like I like stuff like this. This is where I geek out. So
absolutely.
It gets a lot of fun. All right. So the big move for the week, Splunk acquired VictorOps, $120 million. This is good. This is a good exit. So VictorOps has raised about $36.3 million over 3 rounds. Now the rounds get weird. So this is one of those things where you look at it and you say, okay, so how, like 3 rounds, right? There was a debt round report. Like the papering on it was really kind of weird, which tells me there could be more than 3 rounds, but just assume it was the 3 rounds, $36 million, $120 million exit. That's almost a 4X. It's a solid 3+. That's not bad. Like that is a good exit. But take a look at what Splunk acquired, right? Because if you remember, they got Phantom Cyber. They had one other one that I can't remember. And then so VictorOps is a unified incident management platform that offers real-time alerting, collaboration, and documentation for, drumroll please, DevOps teams. This is a good move for Splunk. I mean, Splunk built themselves up. They're a bit of a premium product today, but they're now looking at the capabilities that they need to be that one-stop shop, and they're on the hunt for it. So
yeah, and I think
cool for them.
Both these acquisitions speak to. I like that you mentioned Phantom Cyber. I'd forgotten about that, but that's very relevant to this acquisition here of VictorOps, Michael. It was very astute of you to point that out. And I think what they're really trying to do is play in that operation space, right?
Absolutely.
Say, hey, look, we'll collect a bunch of data for you, but you're going to have to act upon that, and let's help you automate that with Phantom Cyber and tie some of that automation into your DevOps team. Those are 2 very strategic acquisitions for Splunk. If they can keep their prices down, they're still going to be a strong player in the market, because the one thing I hear is it's an investment to get into the upper levels at Splunk or
or I'm not sure what the base level is, right? But when you start building on that, the complaint tends to be about the price tag that's associated with it. Let's hope that they're giving the value. I talk to some Splunk customers that are happy with it, and others that are searching for cheaper, innovative solutions. This is probably Splunk's answer to that. Be like, look, we got this innovation, we acquired it, and hopefully they can come up with a lower priced offering. I think they'd be awesome in the marketplace.
I think there's a flip side to it too, which is they can now sell into other places. We've had this longstanding narrative that security needed their own tools for the 20 some odd years I've been doing this. And I'm starting to see, I noticed this trend in the last decade where I would have people at security conferences come up, I'd give the keynote, and they'd come up and they'd say, hey, I'm not on the security team. I have a question. Why won't the security team let me run that tool? Or I already have tools that can do this. Why won't they listen to me? I see this as that answer. I see this as somebody else saying, you know what? We need to give people the power to do their jobs. And that means engaging with the security team. And I love it. Like, this is very refreshing to me. I think it's important on a security team to push stuff to the edges. So if you can now do orchestration and automation, and you can do your integration with DevOps, that means now I might not sell to the security team. I might be selling to the DevOps team and clicking a security bucket. I might be selling to somebody else and clicking the security bucket. And I've seen that in some vendors, and I've seen that in a couple of our partners and sponsors as well. And guess what? It's doing really well because those groups are much better at managing the value. So they can come back and say, hey, that saved us X amount on storage. That saved us X amount of time. We deployed faster. We deployed better. And that trades up real savings really fast. And oh, by the way, we got a good lift with security, and security's happy. In fact, I'll go a step further. If you're a CISO listening to this, that might mean you can get someone else to pay for what you need and be happy about the fact that it's on their budget, not yours.
And you wonder, Michael, over the past 10 years, have we seen this convergence in the solution space? Is it a solution maturity or a culture thing, or both, that has kind of led to... It's both, right? Because I remember... I think
it's an organizational maturity too.
Yeah, and I remember early days in the university, I'm like, well, I'm like, we're a security team of 2, maybe 2.5, right? And like, we get all this stuff to do in vulnerability management. Like, there's no way that I can go run all these scans and analyze the results and make recommendations for the entire organization. I'm like, I want other teams to have this tool and look at the results and take action on them and have their own processes. At the time, I think you're right. It was organizational maturity, it was the solutions maturity, and it was kind of the culture about IT and security that weren't quite there yet to really push that forward. I think you fast forward to today, and we're starting to see that more and more.
Yeah, we're at the start.
And people embrace it.
It's
I think
not
more
here,
people
but it's
embrace
coming,
it.
and it's great. Yeah, and if you can do that, if you can take advantage of that, like again, take the great interview we just had with Sandy, and she's talking about shifting left in the organization, but she's looking at it, and this fits into everything we like to do with the straight talk approach. It's understanding other perspectives, understanding how the work gets done, and then making sure that you're improving it for the sake of improving it, not just doing it for the sake of doing it. And I see things like this. It's a smart play for Splunk on a lot of reasons. It's a good exit for the people at VictorOps, and I think overall this signals a growing and welcome trend in the security space. Now, I agree. The secondary part to it is, what does the pricing structure look like? How do you get into it? I'm of two minds. On one hand, I think Splunk probably needs to pay attention to it. On the other hand, there's an advantage to being the category king. Sure. And I love then how this creates innovation, because we've talked to people that said, well, actually, I can give you this cheaper. Or we see a lot of people now that they sideload stuff because Splunk can't do it as well yet, or Splunk costs too much to do that. But that's great, because if you're solving that problem, and we know Splunk's on an acquiring spree, congratulations, you've got an acquisition opportunity.
Yeah, you've got a potential exit there. Certainly.
So that's good. Now, same vein, and I didn't know this one as well. Maybe you've got some more experience with them, but is it Claroty? Is how I say it. $60 million Series B. So this is another one of those ones where you look at their funding rounds. They had an equity round of $32 million in 2016. An equity round, $32 million. That's not an A round, everybody. Like, that's a growth round to begin with, and a 60. So this is where calling it a Series B, that's a papering exercise. Don't worry about that. $60 million raised means that you're in growth mode. Like that's what you're doing. And that makes sense to me because if you're trying to do vulnerability detection and threat monitoring and you're trying to handle it in the industrial sector, if you're in the US, this is the hot topic today. Everybody is talking about it. The government is taking a look at it. All sorts of stuff here. This is great positioning for them to be able to go after these types of things. That said, despite all their money, it's not a company I've personally come across at all. And I've worked with clients in the energy sector, so it was kind of interesting to me. Have you come across them, Paul?
I haven't. No, I think it's an interesting play. I'm trying to see like what exactly what industrial industries they play in and how vulnerability management is different.
What? I'd have to pull them up again real quick, and I can do that as we're talking about it. They're pretty much playing into that ICS space, I think.
Okay. Is that what you mean by industrial sector? Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and that can be slightly different as your operational technology is vastly different landscape than your traditional IT infrastructure. So I can see there is a whole industry of basically security that's applied to that because it is a lot of the requirements and landscape is very different. Although I think there's a lot of convergence, especially with IoT. However, I go back to our previous conversation and also tie it into this this story as well, Michael, is that when I start looking now at solutions, the ones to me that have the most value, it's almost not about really combining security with operations, but that it's the same thing to begin with, right? So if I've got some kind of exposure, misconfiguration, or some kind of issue with my system, on the surface, right, I need to detect that. It doesn't matter if it's security. It doesn't matter if it's operational. It could be performance related. It could be just a bug, or a vulnerability. But I need to know about them. In the same context, help me prioritize those. Right? Like I'm not saying I think that's the big thing. Security things,
you just hit on for me what's the biggest part of it. It's you and I have been fortunate to meet a lot of people that have actually worked in the intelligence community and or folks that have worked on that intelligence and turned it into boots kicking down doors. It always comes down to prioritization. It comes down to timeliness and relevance of information in the appropriate context to be able to act on it. And that's been, I think, one of the challenges of the solutions that we've seen in the past and why we almost see this marketing backlash against, we're not just alerts, because alerts, people have figured out waste time. On average, 90% of their time is wasted on alerts. And so what we see now is this growing trend toward, I'm going to give you information, I'm going to validate it a number of different ways. So if I'm actually presenting it to you, it's no longer an alert. And people are calling it different things, and it doesn't really matter to me. What matters to me is the outcome. So what you're telling me is if I get this signal, that's probably something I should go take a look at. Yes. Yeah. And I should act on it timely. Yes.
As the manager of our internal software project, as an example, right, I really get the perspective, through this lens of what it means to like manage a project. And I'm like, I want to know about all of the variables, right? And to go back to our conversation last Thursday, right, I want to know about everything because I need to work with my team to prioritize that. So let me know, like, if we've got performance issues, if we've got scalability, reliability, or security issues, or if there's some change now that we're going to incur too much technical debt. I want to know about it all right now, and let's prioritize it. Security is going to be in the mix, and that's important, right? But so are those other things. And how do we prioritize to make sure that we're taking into consideration all those factors and building the appropriate amount so that, one, we don't incur too much technical debt, and two, we minimize unplanned work, right? And that's really in unplanned work, that could be some kind of heinous performance thing, some kind of upgrade we didn't do that bit us, or it could be a big security event. And so I think we need to stop looking at it as operations and security being separate. It's all the same thing.
I completely agree with you, and that's why I think a lot of people are moving this way. I'm going to point out something interesting on this the Claroty website. They have a bit. It's below what we call below the fold. It says the difference, and I think this is fascinating. I'm actually curious if you have an opinion on this, not just you, Paul, but you listening to us right now. With substantial funding and an unparalleled executive team, they've built the leading company in industrial cyber today. Wow, that's interesting. I mean, by the way, they're all about energy and power,
sure,
and stuff like that, and it makes sense. But it's interesting that they're kind of leading out, say, look, we've got the funding, so we're awesome. I don't actually dispute that. I mean, $92 million in funding is no small.
It's a lot of
no
funding.
small potatoes for this, and so with the right team, it was kind of interesting to see that as a difference.
Not a lot of revenue being reported though to back up that funding though.
No,
quote,
but I think it's coming.
Yeah, well, one quote was 131K in revenue. I'm not sure if that's in the past.
Assume that's wrong.
Oh, yeah, and then the estimated revenue on Owler is 7.5 million.
That feels probably more accurate,
sure.
and that's why they took on a bit of funding right now. I think. All right, so let's take a look at it. If you're one of these companies, it's interesting because Paul, you just said, "Hey, I think we need more integration and we need to be better about everything." That's why when we do the value prop stuff, we talk about impact. I want to understand, how do you work with my existing environment? Do you make what I have better? Yeah, I like you. No, you're probably going to degrade value for me. But it's really hard sometimes as a startup to say, right, and I could do all these things. It's much easier for them to say, I've got this great credibility in the industrial space. We understand energy production and distribution, and we know how to secure that. And PS, it's a really hot topic right now. Makes it great to go get in your $60 million of funding to say, if everybody knew about us, if we were out there and we were considered the category kings, we can own the energy marketplace. Oh, and by the way, once we own the energy marketplace with our platform, we can add this, we can add this, we can add this, we can add this, and we can go forward from there. So I think it'll be interesting to see where they go. Yeah, it's an interesting space. So if you're in that space and you've got insights on them or opinions, as you've seen us do over the last 2 years, we don't have to name names in terms of you giving us insights, but I'm always curious to know what you think of it and how it goes. So, Paul, this is a story you picked out.
Yeah.
MIT's mind-blowing solutions to the 9 hardest startup problems. I think it's really neat, too, because it's written by Peter Cohan. And Peter Cohan, I actually interviewed him when I was still doing the writing for CSO. He is a professor at Bentley. Oh, gosh, I probably just got that wrong. One of the Boston colleges, so it's not fair. And so he reached out to MIT and said, here are 9 problems. What are your answers to it? And they came back. And they had, I thought, some pretty good answers. There's a few here that stood out to me. I'm going to go with the one that I liked best. It was question number 3. How should CEOs create and sustain a culture that helps their startups to scale? And he said, look, go eat culture, eat strategy for breakfast. And he basically said that this is absolutely important. And I just want to add to that, yes, and I think that's actually a proxy, because I watch a lot of people spin their wheels worrying about strategy, and they don't always understand the difference between strategy and tactics. And if you go back and you look at a lot of stuff around that, it really comes down to, in fact, I think it was one of our generals, Marshall or somebody said, violently executed, it beats brilliantly planned. Yep, there you go. But what I've also looked at is its execution will beat that. So when we say culture eats strategy, yes, and that culture needs to be one that prioritizes action. And we've got another article about that today that I think gives us some insight.
I thought it was a great article for those that may be considering doing a startup. I thought it covered a lot of the aspects we've talked about here in the show, Michael, very succinctly. In question 1, I think is arguably one of the most important ones in my mind. You a sprinter or a marathoner? I thought that was really good, right? And there's something to be said for a really fast growth path. And if you set that out from the beginning, it's super important to have that planned out and know that that's your goal versus this is something that's going to grow more slowly over time. And that's something that I think I struggled with and didn't quite understand in the startup world. Like, why are you taking on so much money and fast tracking it? Like, that fast track is very different from maybe we're going to take a little bit of funding or maybe we're going to bootstrap and we're going to grow this thing. So I thought that was important. And then I think the other thing is, knowing yourself about what kind of CEO you're going to be. In other words, how far are you going to get before you start to get help, you start to get a new CEO, and that's going to depend largely on question 1 certainly, and some of your other goals that you're setting for yourself and your company, which I thought was important things to think about. Certainly, I like the culture one as well, Michael. In revenue tiers. This is an important exercise we haven't talked about on the show in some time, Michael, is to think about your numbers. Like, okay, how long would it take with this model before I get to $1 million? And then
that's a fair point.
How do we go to 10 million after that? And where does 100 million? And if your model starts breaking down, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's going to help you in your planning.
Yeah, this was a great article for all that. I want to underscore something you said too in terms of knowing yourself. A lot of the leaders I work with, that's actually the basis of it. And in fact, some of the books that I'm looking at that I'm bringing my kids through over the summer are specifically geared around that. And I'm not sure how much time we'll give them on the program, but I'm going to build like a quiet starter pack and say, hey, if you're trying to figure some of this stuff out for yourself, these are the things that are going to really set that foundation for you. What I think is always fascinating is, are you the person who's going to be the CEO when you cross these different thresholds, or are you suited to, so back to that sprinter versus marathoner, and there's a few other options in there. And I've always been impressed by the people who say, look, I'm the startup guy, but I'm not going to be the CEO. That somebody else can have that. And I respect that. Like, I like that. I think knowing that is good, because as it calls out, you see some of these other folks in different positions and you think that's the way it's going to be, and it's not always. So no, it was good. It was good. And we covered a lot of stuff in a short period of time. 2 techniques for helping employees change ingrained habits. This is this was great. And I'm going to cut right to what I really liked about it. It's called implementation intentions. It's an if-then statement, and this is so insanely powerful. I hope this is the one, go read this. Basically says, look, we always talk about change and we get ourselves really excited. And despite even the negativity and the bias that we have in security to see the things that go wrong, we always say, but if I just do this and this and this and it'll work this way, it'll be great. We need to get better at being able to say, and what's likely to get in the way? That's part of the reason we're going to talk about time audits next week. But when you do that, and this was the real big key here, and I love this, figure out what the obstacles are going to be and then set the implementation intention. So it goes like this: if this obstacle happens, this is the response I'm going to have. And this is what we miss. We tell people that things are going to change, but we don't give them the ability to have any agency, any control over how they're going to act with those changes. This is what solves that. You let them identify the potential obstacles or the things that get in their own way. And it's great if you're trying to change your own behaviors or patterns, just saying, okay, so when this happens, and I'll give you one from the world of diets, right? Like, I have this craving for ice cream. Okay, well, what can you do instead of it? Well, I can do this, or I can do this. It's not just say no. It's, I can do this. I can acknowledge it. I can whatever. And you can start to put yourself into a better position. I think it's really cool. There's a book called The Obstacle's the Way. It's based a little bit on Stoic philosophy. It was a really good read. Like, I'm debating. It's a book I've thoroughly enjoyed. I got to debate if it's like one of the 6 we'll recommend left for this year. But it's kind of proving that, right? It's a simple, not easy thing. If you understand where the obstacles are, overcoming those becomes your way. But in order to do that, you can't just say, and I'm going to take it. Nope. If that pops up, then this is what we will do. And you can regroove patterns and behaviors and everything. This, to me, it's worth reading. It's easy read. It's got a couple examples in there, some very specific examples on how to do it. I think it's really powerful. The last one we threw in there, the same thing, and these are all kind of on the same idea here. Go fast and break things. The difference between reversible and irreversible decisions. And the point is, not all decisions are equal. The amount of information, the perfection of the information that you need in order to make a good decision types it changes. And it really breaks down to, can you reverse the decision, or is the decision irreversible? Sandy talked about that. She said, look, I'm in healthcare. Healthcare tends to be conservative because we're dealing with people, and we're dealing with their needs, and we're dealing with all. And so we move at a much more measured pace. Okay. They're going to be making more irreversible decisions, and therefore there's a defined process with sets of information and a way that they deliberate on that. What I found, and this gave me the voice to something I've looked at for a while, which is go thrash around a bit, try it. I used to always joke, I don't know about you, Paul, I do everything twice, the first time and then the right way. Mm-hmm. But the first time didn't matter. I was building out shelves in a closet. I was figuring something out. But you learn over time, you figure it out. And yeah, they're easily reversible decisions. Now, what I kind of look at like here though is there's a cautionary tale in it. I call them the boomerang decisions, because these happen to us in security all the time. You go to the meeting, you tell them what you want, and they go, sounds great, I love it. Then 3 days later, yeah, about that. Yeah, we changed our mind. Wait, what? That's not an irreversible versus reversible decision. That's just a corporate challenge that we need to work our way through. So I just wanted people to understand that, reversible decisions don't mean that you're going to get a yes and then someone's going to come along later and tell you no. It's more about, are there things in your environment where somebody can try? And okay, doesn't work out. Cool, didn't work. All right, let's try the next thing. And so this is where like the agile world and that DevOps, that Sec DevOps, DevSecOps, whatever we call it today, 2 week cycles. Like, can you try something that's not a lot of cycles in 2 weeks? see how it works.
How reversible is this decision? I think when you put it in a software context, that tends to be a line of questioning that I ask. Like, so we're going to go with that database. Like, what if we want to change someday? Like, how much work is that on a scale of like 1 to 100? Is that like a 90 or is it more like a 25, right?
Right. Yeah, versus getting that data now or transacting it and realizing this really is a minimum viable product. And yeah, we're going to have to re-engineer it, right? And that's where the discussions of technical debt come in and everything else. And some of that, frankly, we don't know until we get through it. That's the thing I'm finding in my 40s is that in my 20s, I didn't understand some of that nuance. I was much more for going fast and breaking things. And in my 40s, I'm not against it, but now I see that sometimes it's worth going a little slower and some stuff it's worth going a little faster.
Yeah.
You know, and it's trying to figure out that balance. And I don't know that it's easy.
No.
But that's definitely the type of stuff that we take a look at. So I'm not sure how we did today in terms of trying to keep everything tight. The way I've looked at it is we're going to try to program these segments for 2 24-minute segments. I mean, to be fair, I always look at network radio and network television. Those seem to be about the length of programs, right? 22 minutes to 24 minutes. We're going to try to catch up with that, and just so that way we're giving you tight, actionable information in short bursts. So, of course, as always, let us know how we're doing. I'm about to head to the airport. In fact, I had some trip cancellations, but I'm going to be working with another enterprise client this week, including some stuff around a time audit. So I'm looking forward to sharing that with everybody next week. In the meantime, you can catch me on Twitter at Catalyst. Paul is at Security Weekly. You can hit me up on LinkedIn. You can let us know what you thought of today's show. You can send us email, feedback. I'm not good with smoke signals or pigeons, but if you can get one to me, I'll do my best and try to figure it out. And I'll leave you with this. The exceptional, oh my goodness. Maybe I should just cut it right here. Exceptional leaders elevate the people around them. And our goal is to help you be more exceptional. Here's to your week of making the people around you just a little bit better. And we'll see you next Monday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Have a great week.